Welcome to A Drop of Silence, the groundbreaking podcast series that dives deep into the realms of controversy. Join us as we bring special guests who share their extraordinary experiences and offer unparalleled insight into history, today's news headlines, and the future. Get ready to embark on a thought-provoking journey where silence speaks volumes and the truth lies somewhere beneath the surface.
What time will it be when war is no more? When bullets are melted and the warships more.
This week's guest is Hedy Halpern. Hedy and I have been friends now for over 20 years. She's an absolutely delightful, caring soul. You'll never see anybody who's straighter and truer to the truth and to honesty and love than Hedy is with her wife, Colleen. I asked Hedy to come on because when you look at her, you think, oh, I've had a happy, happy life. She didn't. She came out in a time when it was not acceptable to be gay. And Hedy and Colleen were one of the first couples, lesbian couples, to be married in Canada when that finally became a law that they could do that. And I felt it was important that people see the struggle and the pain and the hardship that this prejudice against people for just being who they are. You know, it's horrifying what happens. And Hedy's strong and brave, and she's accepted everything that's happened. But by golly, she's a fighter, and it's that fight that I want you to see, that how she got through everything by being the strong, determined woman she is.
Shalom, everybody, and welcome to A Drop of Silence. I'm Pam Goldstein. I am the host of this podcast series, and with me today is Hedy Halpern. Welcome, Hedy. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine, Pam. How are you?
I'm good. Now, Hedy, she was a registered nurse for over 40 years before retiring, and she's been a staunch warrior for as long as I've known her. She's been a staunch warrior for human rights and same-sex marriages. And that's been for at least that same amount of time as your nursing career, hasn't it?
Pretty close, yeah. Pretty close.
Let's start with, what was the interest in same-sex marriages? You're married to Colleen.
I am.
And how did... Go ahead.
We have been together now for over 26 years.
Just babies compared to Will and me.
I know. The only reason that we weren't together before was we just didn't meet each other. We should have been. But the bottom line was, Colleen has been married before to men and had the right to choose whether to be married or not. And then we met and we were told, no. So it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel right that because we had the same sexual characteristics, sex characteristics, that somebody could decide whether or not we were eligible to be loved. And so when we decided to have a commitment ceremony, we had dinner with a friend who happened to be a law student on the day that we picked up our invitations. And she told us that she knew of a lawyer who was looking for stable same-sex couples to be part of the marriage challenge in Canada. And we told her to tell the lawyer to get in touch with us. The lawyer got in touch with us. Fast forward, it took a few years, but we were finally able to legally get married. So we tell everybody that we have been married X number of years, and it's taken the government 3 years to catch up to us with the paperwork, because it was years after our commitment ceremony that we were able to make it legal.
Yeah, wow. Now your name is on your names are on a document about same-sex marriage. What is that
Right.
document?
Well, under the government of Ontario, every single case has to have some kind of an identifier or a name or whatever. The lawyers, and we still don't know why, put my name at the head of the entire list of the 8 couples who started the marriage challenge. So everybody has heard of Roe versus Wade or whatever. There was an actual Roe, there was an actual Wade. In this case, it's Halpern et al. Versus Canada. So I'm the Halpern, obviously. And when Colleen and I found out that that's how it looked, we read the actual document when it came down the day that the judgment was delivered. And I looked at her and I went, oh my God, the name has just gone down in history. Would you consider becoming a Halpern? So she did.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now, what was the year that happened?
That was,
document?
the judgment was in 2003. So it was 20 years ago last June.
Wow. And what was there any lashback to having your name on that?
No, surprisingly. Most people that we know, at any rate, have been pretty supportive. If anybody has had negative comments, they haven't directed them at me. So I'm grateful for that. Very grateful.
When did you realize that you were going to that your inclinations were towards women?
I was probably about 6.
And what was the incident?
There was no specific incident. And when somebody asks me this question, I turn around and I go, so when did you figure out that you were heterosexual?
I was 18. I was stupid.
Okay, you were slow, but but I mean, most people will say they knew fairly early that they were attracted to one or the other, or people who were bisexual are attracted to both. People who are asexual are attracted to nobody. I mean, the whole spectrum is there. But I think if you ask most people, there's usually not a moment in time. It's who you are. Now, having said that, at age 6, and up until many, many, many years later, I was very careful because I knew that was not the accepted norm.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I couldn't be vocal about it.
Instinctively, you knew that.
Yeah.
Instinctively, you knew
Yeah.
that.
I mean, if you look around you, unless you grow up in a non-traditional household, most of your parents' friends are in heterosexual marriages. Most of them have girlfriends if they're men, boyfriends if they're women. So you don't see many people that look like you in the world. And I mean, I'm over 70 now, and certainly back then, it was impossible to, even when I was in my 20s and still living in Montreal, if you wanted to put an ad in the paper to find somebody, you had to be very careful about the wording. You had to say things like interested in meeting women for fun or fun times. There was, no such thing as looking for a woman as a mate. It didn't happen,
Now, did you have a lot of friends in grade school and high school, or did you find that people wanted to steer clear of you, or were just, how kids are when they're suspicious of things. They just
Oh, I was very, very, very closeted. It
okay.
was not something out in the open at all. I dated guys. People might have not wanted to hang out with me because I was a nerd, but it had less to do with who I was attracted to. I had friends. I still have. I'm still friends with some of the people I was friends with in high school. One friend is since kindergarten.
Wow.
So, um, and of all the friends that I know from way back then, there's only one other that I know of that is lesbian. So, kind of interesting. I don't pick my friends based on who they love. I mean, you and I are friends.
Yeah. So
I won't hold your heterosexuality against you.
Oh, you're too kind. You're too kind.
I know.
Gregory Peck. Me and Gregory Peck, we got a thing. Except he's dead. Did you feel like when was the first time you were attracted to a girl?
As I said, probably 6 or 7, but seriously attracted. Seriously attracted. I was probably about 16 or 17.
And you weren't comfortable in approaching that person and telling them? Not at all?
Nope. Interestingly, when I was in college, there were 2 women that I became friends with. And one of them decided to do what was it called? The Lucier color test. I don't know if you ever read through that book or not, but depending on what colors you picked and what order you picked them in, it might peg you as homosexual.
Wow.
Now, I have always loved purple. I'm wearing purple today just because I love the color. And so one of the colors that I automatically picked would be purple. Well, one woman decided that was because I had to be homosexual. And she stopped talking to me. And I went, okay. And then for a while, when I came out to somebody, I would say, I'm telling you because we're friends, not because I'm going to put a move on you or whatever. And the reason that I had to say stuff like that was because some people thought that if I came out to them, it was because I was interested in them.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I told you I was straight, you wouldn't think anything of it because 99% of the world is straight, 90%, whatever. But if I tell you that I'm not heteronormative, you or not you, but people might be suspicious that I'm telling you because I have intentions towards you. Not true. Not, I'm as selective as any straight person I know in who I'm attracted to.
Yeah.
So
when did you tell your parents?
My father, I never did tell. My mother, we talked about it not too long before she passed away when I was 38. And the very last conversation that I had with her, she said to me, I am waiting for the day that you bring home a nice boy. And I looked at her and I said, Mom, you're going to wait for a very long time. She was dead a day and a half later. That was hard. That was hard. Do I feel like I disappointed her? Possibly. Do I feel that at this point she gets it? I hope so. When I met Colleen, who is not Jewish, one of the things that as a Jew I do on the anniversary of my parents' death is I light what we call the yahrzeit candle, which is a memorial candle. And my mom's yahrzeit came up just a few weeks after Colleen and I met. And when I lit the candle, she had one of those stone coasters ready for me to put it on. And her youngest son, when he saw it, asked if it could be done for his grandfather, who had just passed away less than a year earlier. So the two of us have lit them every year for both our parents, who have all passed on. And it's funny because when we light them, we tell the parent who's visiting as while the candle is going, we tell them that we hope you realize that your child is very loved and hope that you're happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
It must be so hard not to have your parents' support. Like in my family, we have a cousin, and everybody knew at a very early age that he was gay. It was never discussed. It was just accepted that this is who he was, and we all supported him. We all loved him, but it was never discussed. And I don't know if we did him any justice by just accepting him that way and not talking about it.
Well, I mean, times have changed, okay? If your kids or our kids were gay, bi, whatever, I would hope that today it would be okay to talk about it. But when you think about how the ultra right wing of just about every faith on this planet is backlashing against any kind of human rights for people who are gay, lesbian, bi, trans, whatever, it's becoming very, very scary again. Yeah. For a lot of people. And I feel fortunate. Colleen and I are in our 70s. And if I'm holding her hand, they go, oh, look at that. She's helping her because she's doddering along. Okay, so we're fortunate to be old. But if we were young and if we, lived in an area where it wasn't so acceptable, I don't know. I'd be probably afraid to be out. There are many places, small towns in Canada and the US, where I wouldn't want to be out, even today. Yeah. For the first time in my life, though, I am less afraid to be out as a lesbian than I am as a Jew, which I never expected.
How scary is that?
When I think about the fact of how hidden I was as a lesbian, to be even more afraid now, that doesn't feel good. I'm very grateful that my parents are no longer alive to witness this because my father survived 44 months in the concentration camps.
Yeah. So if your parents didn't support you, who did you rely on for emotional support while becoming an adult and becoming the person who you are? Or did you have anybody?
I had a few people in my life. Several of my teachers, I wasn't out to them, but they were supportive of me growing up in a very dysfunctional home. Wasn't easy. There are people that I know who it wasn't until we were much older would say to me, Hedy, we never knew how much pain you were going through when you were growing up. You always had a smile on your face. You always had something nice to say to somebody.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until we were older and discussing some of the crappy households that we lived in, but nobody talked about it.
Yeah, that my daughter doesn't understand that. She says, "How can you not talk about that your cousin was gay?" I said, "It just was never brought up. Sexuality
Nope.
was never brought up. It was
Nope.
accepted in my household anyway. It was accepted, but it wasn't discussed.
I
Nobody
had
discussed it."
I had a friend who was a foster kid, and she would go home to her dad. Her mother had passed away, and she'd go home to her dad's every other weekend. And it wasn't until she dropped out of high school at the beginning of our final year and she moved away, and she told me in confidence that her father had been sexually abusing her every single weekend that she spent with him. We didn't know. We had no clue.
Yeah,
Okay. She looked like you or me, but look at what she was carrying.
yeah,
I had other friends who had alcoholic parents, and boy, you didn't talk about it. You
yeah,
just didn't. It was hard to. Colleen's family grew up with what will the neighbors think? And so you learned that certain things stayed within the walls of your home,
yeah, yeah.
you
Do you
know?
think it's any better now? Is it easier for kids to come out with their sexuality now than it was back when you were coming out and when my cousin was coming out? Like, is it easier?
It's probably easier for some kids, um, but it scares me for kids now whose families are full of hate,
Yeah,
okay, who tell their kids, if you ever came back and told me you liked somebody of the same sex, you'd be out on your ear, and they would be.
yeah,
So those kids,
yeah.
I
It's
I don't
hard.
know. I know of kids who have a parent who is rabidly homophobic, who will never come out as long as that parent is alive. They wouldn't
Um,
dare because they would lose that parent. Okay. And they know it. They know it. So um, it's not easy. I
mm,
really and truly hope that for every child who has family like that, that they find somewhere that they feel safe,
yeah.
because safety is paramount.
So the sex education that's being taught in the public schools these days, there's so many parents who are against it. They think, oh, this is not something I want my child to know about. My child doesn't need to know that somebody is, can be trans. My child doesn't need to know about homosexuality and all of that. And they're horrified by it. But do you think if that would had been taught in your day, low
Not a
those
chance.
it wouldn't have happened, but
Mm-mm.
would it have made a difference for you? Would it have made your life
to
easier?
see that there were people, the first time that I heard the word lesbian and I found out what it meant, I went, oh my God, I'm not the only one.
Yeah,
Okay. Oh my God, there are other people like me on this planet. That means that I'm not a freak.
hmm,
Okay. So if a child is heterosexual, it doesn't matter to that child that somebody else isn't, because they're supported in being who they are. But if you are gay, lesbian, trans, bi, whatever, and you cannot even see, I mean, they're doing things like banning books that say so and so has two mommies.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, what's wrong with having two mommies?
We're taking like 10 steps back.
Oh, yeah. When our youngest son started school here in Windsor, because Colleen, we all moved to Windsor from different parts of the world to set up our household together. And so our son was in grade 7, and we were very fortunate because the school that he went to, the principal was a remarkable woman. And the first day, she asked if Colleen and I wanted to go upstairs to meet his teacher with him. And she introduced him saying, "This is so and so, and these are his parents, Colleen and Hedy." And that set the tone for our interaction with the school. I was given full respect and full permission to be an active parent because of her actions. It was, I remember leaving the school after we dropped him off and just like breathing this huge, huge sigh of, oh my God, this might work. Okay. Had the principal been less tolerant, it could have been a very, very different scenario.
Yeah.
So we were fortunate in that regard, but we were, and his teacher, whom I've become friends with, said, "Did you know that some of the kids came up to me and said, 'Did you know that so-and-so has 2 mothers?'" And she'd go, "Yeah, so?" And the kids would go, "Oh, it's not a problem." "No, it's not. Have you done your homework?"
Yeah.
So it's okay for people to question, but the responses from the adults around you are what set the tone. If the teacher had said, "Oh my God, he's got 2 mothers," it would have been a very different experience,
Yeah.
So we have to be aware that not everybody is,
Yeah.
we don't all fit in the same box. We just don't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always been a major issue because of the way my family handled it, which I thought was perfectly normal. It doesn't matter, like, because you own your own sexuality. Like, it doesn't matter what your sexuality is, it's yours to own and to do with it what you want. And I listen to these people nowadays and I'm just horrified. What do you mean you want to take out this? What do you mean you want to remove these books so that these kids don't hear about this? Why are people acting like this? Like, this is like a terrible thing that you're doing. I think kids are far more sophisticated than people realize.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
and that they accept things far more easily than their parents do.
I was a reader from a very young age. Okay. I had a friend who was 2 years ahead of me in school, and we played school a lot, and she played teacher because she knew more than I did. And so I was reading before I was actually in grade 1. And teachers and librarians and people found out that I loved to read. So they would say, "Oh, we got this new book that came in." I never once saw any books about anything to do with sex,
Yeah.
let alone even something as innocuous as somebody with 2 same-sex parents. Okay. None of that was available that I was aware of. But I was reading books that were probably far ahead of my age bracket because like I said, I was a nerd. I read.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it have been lovely to read books about people who had families that were a bit different? I don't know if you remember, but in geography class, I remember we had this geography book where you had kids from around the world. So you read about Bunga in
Yeah, yeah.
and this kid that lived here and that kid that lived there. But so you got to meet different kids, but you never, ever, ever, ever got to meet a kid who lived with two moms or two dads, or if you, with the Indian kid, you saw they had an extended family living under the same roof because that was their culture. But that was about it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it have been lovely to see that there were families that didn't look quite like yours?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's for me, it's so like I just don't understand that thing, because it's so that thinking that keeps kids protected. Because to me, it's so important. It's so vitally important. And what really drove it home for me was about 10 years ago. I'm sitting with a friend. We've been friends for 30, 40 years, and we always went out for coffee once a month. And he was looking a little agitated, and I said to him, I said, "What's going on?" He said, "I'm 64 years old, I never had a girlfriend, never thought about it, never really wanted it. And then the other day I was in a restaurant and my waiter was so cute, and I realized I was really attracted to him." And he looked at me, he said, "Is it possible I'm gay? That I'm a homosexual?" And I said, "Have you, I said," and I'm looking at him thinking he's nuts, but he was dead serious. And he said, there were a few times where I kind of was attracted to a man, but I didn't think anything of it. But now, with all of the stuff that's coming out, he realized he was gay at the age of 64.
Mazel
And
tov. About
yeah,
time.
I know, but I'm sitting there thinking how sad that he never lived his life
Mm-hmm.
because he didn't know like anything of where to go or how to find out who he was. Like he had no
Right.
idea. So
Yeah.
getting back to what we started with, this document that your name is on, since then, do you think things have been easier for people who are in love with same sex? Is it
Oh,
easier?
absolutely. Absolutely. Up until we could legally be married, for instance, Colleen would never call herself my wife. She was my spouse or my partner or whatever. And once we were legally married, we are both wives. We both use that term. And I remember being at work after we were legally married, and I'm talking to somebody, and I said, "Yeah, my wife and I did blah on the weekend." And this person said, "You're what?" And I went, "Yeah, my wife, we're legally married," and just carried on with the conversation as if, yeah, okay.
It's
Other
normal.
people talk about their opposite sex spouse. I talk about mine. And if you have a problem with it, then it's
Yeah.
your problem. It's
Yeah,
not
exactly.
ours. Once it became legal, um, there's not much that people can say. I remember hearing people say, "Yeah, those same-sex people, they're ruining the institution of marriage." And I look at them and I go, "Okay, so now I've been legally allowed to marry the person that I love. Show me one marriage that's been destroyed because we got married."
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if you can't show me a marriage, you really have nothing to tell me about. Not interested. And if you're prejudiced, keep it to yourself. Our son was in a program out in Calgary, and one of the things that they looked at was the way that laws have changed in Canada. And by that time, we were legally married. And he came out to his prof, who then had Colleen and me participate in the class through a Zoom type, call it predate Zoom. I think it was Facebook Messenger or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But at the end of the discussion, the prof opened up the floor for the kids to be able to ask us questions. And I very nicely, before they got to ask any, I said, "We'll answer pretty much any question, but if you want to know what we do in bed, Google it,
Yeah.
because
I
we're not
remember you
discussing
telling me
that.
that.
That's not going to happen,
Yeah.
And it never will, because it's just not.
Yeah, it's nobody's business.
Yeah.
So, on a final note, is there anything more you think needs to be done to make the world safer for homosexuals and lesbians and the whole gang? I'm just going to call them the gang because
Yeah. There's too many letters in
there's
the
too
alphabet.
many
I
now.
get it.
I can't even remember
I
my
get
own
it. I
name,
get
let
it.
alone an alphabet. But is there any legislation or anything that still needs to be done that would make all of your lives, everybody's lives, safer in that? Or is legalizing marriage been the one that has changed the path of history for you?
Well, the legalization is massive. I think here in Canada at the moment, we are in a pretty good place. Okay, because it started out with individual provinces legalizing marriage. And then it took a while before the entire country became okay for legalizing marriage. But I think the thing that is the most scary is that we're leading towards much more right wing politicians who don't like the fact that there are people like Colleen and me that can legally get married because neither one of us has the opposite set of genitalia. Okay. I think that now that it is enshrined in our rights, we shouldn't have to keep fighting for them to stay enshrined in our rights. Okay. We are fortunate here in Canada so far. I feel really frightened for people who live in countries throughout the Middle East, except for Israel, where it is okay. Not only or like Russia or any number of other places, okay, where you can be tortured, you can be murdered, you can be shunned. And I don't know what to do about it because the cultures are so, like, how do you change an entire culture
Cultural thinking
to,
through writing, through books, and through art, I think
yeah,
is a big way.
it's
And
huge. And the more that you censor books,
yeah, the worse it gets.
the worse it gets. So yeah, that would be my thing. I think we have to stay vigilant because, I mean, look at what's happening to abortion rights throughout the US. Okay, that's like, I don't even want to start that whole topic. But I mean, the thing is, abortion rights were enshrined in the US Constitution. Now they're not.
Yeah.
And
And it's so easy to get taken away.
yeah.
That's safe.
And it's like, I mean, I don't know. Like, will we go back to a time where people think it's okay to enslave people again? Or, will we go back to a time where, women's rights? I mean, I'm sorry, Margaret Atwood was so prophetic when she wrote The Handmaid's Tale. I mean, like, I read that when it first came out, and it's like, this could happen. And it is.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, so vigilance. I think vigilance becomes super important. The fact that you and I are having this discussion, it's going to be out there. It's important. I hope that people see it a year from now, 5 years from now. I hope it's out there and people realize that there are people that actually care. And it's not just because I'm a lesbian. I just don't believe that anybody's human rights should be trounced on ever.
Exactly. And I think on that note, I'm going to thank you very much for being part of this podcast series. And
thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And
I hope I did okay.
Oh, you did great. But hopefully we'll see you soon. And maybe you can come back, and as things evolve, you can come back and talk about it again. That would be super.
Thank you.
Okay,
thank you so much.
Thank
Have
you.
a good afternoon.
Thank you.
What time will it be when war is no more? When bullets are melted and the warships moor.
This podcast is brought to you by Unbreakable Bindings Publishing Company. Executive produced by Lori Baldassi, produced by Ryan Richardson, hosted by Pam Goldstein.